Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Pixelists. This definitely isn't the second time that this intro is happening. I'm Will, that's Blake, and today we're here to talk about Critical Role episode 16. um, I
Again.
Yeah. So full disclosure, we were about 10 minutes in to the podcast, and I realized didn't have the audio channel turned on. So we're doing this again.
That'll do it.
But we're here now, and thankfully we weren't too far in.
We gotta have all of our pretend first time questions like, hey, how's your day going?
Yeah, man, it's good to see you.
Yeah, bro. Hey, nice beard.
Witcher 2 coming soon.
Yeah. Just accept it's not coming.
But yeah, so anyways, we're here to talk about episode 16, and like we just joked about, any kind of going over the shooting the shit would be a little bit disingenuous, so we're just gonna jump right into it. If you're new to us, we do the recap to get us kicked off, and we host that separately on YouTube. So if you happen to be watching that recap right now and you're interested in our full thoughts, discussions, and theories, we will link that video below. But without further ado, my good friend Blake, I apologize for making you do this again, but you want to kick us off on the recap?
Of course, it was only the greatest recap I've ever given. So yes, and I am excited to recap this. So this was a pretty awesome episode, and the episode starts out with where we left off, which is Chetney invisible in this cavern with this looming slug-like creature known as the Shade Mother, a lady emoth, and a multitude of shade creepers who are sort of skittering about in this large cavern. The Shade Mother herself can actually detach herself from her large slug carapace, I guess. And also the party finds out that she can fly. So she has these 4 broomstone-esque devices sort of surgically implanted into her that allow her to fly and levitate. And essentially what happens at the start of this episode is the Shade Mother and Emoth are aware of Chetney's presence, and Chetney's a bit freaked out because the Shade Mother actually begins to speak to him in his mind, Lady Imogen style, and is sort of like, where are you? And says pretty stereotypical freaky cultish stuff like, come join us, be one with me, let me hug you, things like that. And Jenny's like, I'm good, no thanks. And she does ask, what's your name? And Jenny's like a bit freaked out at giving away anything revealing, so he just thinks Balls. And she's like, you are called Balls? And he's like, yes, mighty Balls. So that's a nice little bit that happens for the next 2 hours of the episode. No, I'm just kidding. Just for a few minutes. Well, Jenny, skedaddles back to the group and is kind of like, yo, giant slug, Lady Emoth, what do we want to do? And they're kind of, sort of tightening their gloves, like, all right, yeah, we're going to get in there and fight. And Ollie mentions that she has the beads for Lady Emoth and actually hands one over to Chetney in case one of the party members can use this to imprison her, and actually gives a little bit more clarity as to what this little pearl does. Basically says if you touch it to a creature, it imprisons them in a not glass, but sort of glass-esque ball, and that it's unbreakable. And for the next hour, the person's pretty much trapped in there. And Ollie basically says it's used in prisons and things like that. So it's kind of like, yeah, remember guys, we're here for Lady Emoth. That's the goal. And I kind of took this as Matt kind of implying to the party, hey, this is going to be a pretty wild encounter. And so don't feel the need to kill the boss because it's going to get crazy. So party gets in and they actually start talking to the Shade Creeper the Shade Mother. And they're like, hey, so what's going on? What's going on down here? And the Shade Mother is basically just like, let me embrace you. Join me and my children. Again, pretty stereotypically crazy, evil creature stuff. And actually, Laudna decides to cast Silent Image and has a false Duggar crawling out of a hole on the opposite side. And the Shade Mother's kind of like, yeah, I don't really care about that. And she's even like, Matt, what about I have Doug do this? And he's like, nope, doesn't care. She's like, dang it. And I think actually Laudna, as kind of like a joke, or Marisha kind of is like, all right, I just kind of slink back into the shadows, then do nothing. Once the party's kind of like exhausted, like they kind of realize like this isn't really going anywhere. Ashton turns to Gus and says, hey, light him up. And Gus is like, you got it. And begins his fireball, throws it at the massive slug, and just obliterates a large portion of that and some shade creepers on the wall. And then combat starts. It's an awesome combat scene. There's a lot happening here. I'll just run through some of the higher notes that happen. Orym, being our classic courageous hero, immediately starts with goading attack and action surges with a second goading attack, and actually slices underneath the Shade Mother, who is about 10 feet over the party, and slides under her and ends up on her backside so that he can do a flanking maneuver, and doesn't realize that she has a stinger, which very quickly pops him, and he gets injured pretty quickly, pretty badly.
Yeah.
Not only that, but the Shade Mother also does like sort of like this AoE spore burst that hits Orym and a few other people around. Meanwhile, Ashton and Imogen are fighting some shade creepers off to the side. Imogen spots this device in the sort of in the shadows of the lair. And if you remember from the previous episode, Matt had pointed there were a couple of like workshop workstations. Well, she spots this device, and it's very similar actually to one of the devices in the Nightmare King's lab. And there's a bit of an implication here that maybe the Nightmare King is the one who's created the Shade Mother, or who has implanted these broomstone devices into her. Besides that, on this device is this large purple gem that Imogen's like, yeah, I want that. And so yeah, goes, gets it, takes it, and that's her turn. She takes the purple gem. Fern does something really awesome. She casts daylight, realizing that it's really dark in here, not realizing that daylight is actually pretty effective against all of the baddies in this encounter. They're all seemingly blinded, in pain, like literally all of them, the Shade Mother, Lady Emoth, the Shade Creepers. And actually, I think they attack at a disadvantage on that next round. But so daylight's awesome. It's really good. In fact, it's so effective that Lady Emoth has to go down from her ledge that she's hiding on and hide under this outcropping to sort of get away from the daylight, which is the perfect time for Chetney in his invisible form to get over to her and take one of these beads and try to hit her with it. He rolls a natural 20. She has no chance of avoiding it. Hits her with it. She becomes this giant, trapped in this giant orange orb of like this crystal orb, and can't hear her. You can see her inside, just absolutely losing it. And the party just continues with combat. There's a couple other really cool things that happen. Remembering that their goal is to get Lady Emoth and get out. Fern uses her Stonky's ring, which is the ring that allows telekinesis, and that she got from Exandria Unlimited.
Yep.
And uses it to lift the orb and pull it towards her. It actually does it's not a flat terrain. This is a very cavernous area. It actually does get stuck or like wedged in some rocks, which Ashton has to sort of like beat on it to break it free. And what ends up happening is Fern ends up jumping on top of it in a very circus-esque way, begins like running on it to get it going like towards the tunnel. That happens. Meanwhile, Orym takes his magical rope, and there is a sort of drill device that's in here, and decides to basically turn it on, and it gets aimed at the Shade Mother. He puts the rope in the gears of the drill and then ties the other side onto the stinger of the Shade Mother. And I can't think of a movie that does this, but I mean, it's pretty cool.
So cool.
The Shade Mother's tail, or like her stinger, gets drug into the gears of this grinding gears of this drill, and sort of gets immobilized as she gets like she doesn't get killed, but it hurts pretty badly, obviously. And that's really the party's sign to be like, okay, let's get the heck out of here. Let's get going. And the party basically makes their way out into the tunnels like, all right, we're getting out of here.
Less peace.
And that is actually a great time for Will to you take over, because that's actually when they go to their break.
Yeah, absolutely. Well done, by the way. So yeah, we go to break, we come back, and now basically we're met with this like escape section. So they're trying to roll the Lady Emoth orb back out the cavern to the elevator that they took to get down here. But like Blake mentioned, it's not this just wide open area. It's like a cave, so it's kind of difficult terrain, and it's easier said than done. And they're being chased by shade creepers the entire way. But Imogen uses her dancing lights to kind of illuminate, which helps them see, but also lets them see the horde of shade creatures coming their way. So they got to think of something quick. And if you'll recall, the elevator was packed on the way down, and that was before they had a giant Emoth orb that they had to figure out a way to get up as well. So while they're sitting there kind of figuring out a plan for how to get everyone up, they're getting attacked by the few shade creepers that are making their way toward them. And one actually crits Laudna and knocks her unconscious, or at least would knock her unconscious, but she uses this ability she has called the Strength of the Grave, which is able, and she rolls just perfectly enough that she is able to stay alive
exactly
at 1 health. So that was pretty cool. But then the party finally decides, like, okay, Fern's like, what if I use my ring to like hold the orb beneath the cart? And they're like, well, what if it fails for some reason and it just drops into the abyss? So they're like, we can't do that. So ultimately they're like, okay, we're going to put the orb inside, and like the 3 smallest members that will also fit inside go inside. Then everyone else, you're going to stand on top of the cage. So Emoth Orb, F.C.G, Laudna, and Imogen all squeeze inside the cage, and everyone else, including Gus and Ollie, jump on top. But that's so many people on top that it's not really safe for them all up there. So Matt has them roll some checks as the elevator is making its way up, to see if they can stay. Ashton actually rolls a natural 1, but Fern is able to kind of grab him and make sure he doesn't fall. And so eventually they make it to the top with no other setbacks, and there's basically a collective sigh of relief as they all exit the elevator. And at some point during this elevator ride, I forgot to mention, they hear like this shriek from presumably the Shade Mother, and the legions of shade creepers that were following them end up turning back. So at some point, she deemed it wasn't worth it, or maybe she needed help because of the whole drill situation that Blake spoke about. But they did stop
drill
chasing
situation.
them. Yeah, everyday drill situation.
Yeah.
So they make it back to the top, and like I said, they kind of have a moment finally, and so they're kind of catching up, and the Green Seekers are, basically thanking the party for their help, and they say, we're going to take Lady Emoth to our employer, and we will clear y'all's name from suspicion of, the crazy things happening in Drusar. But before they part ways, Imogen does cast Detect Thoughts on Lady Emoth just to kind of get a pulse, and she basically just feels this like deep rage. But Imogen pushes further in and kind of finds a few things out about the Shade Mother, because she asks some questions. And basically what she finds out is, and this is like in Lady Emoth's thoughts, she says she's been down there for a long time, but only recently has evolved. And basically Imogen comes to believe that the person Lady Emoth used to be is no longer like there. Like that person is gone. The Green Seekers do say like, okay, well, again, thanks, but how do we get in touch with you if we need to? And they're like, just check Estros's manor, leave word there if we're not there. That'll be the best way, because we're heading out of town soon. And the Green Seekers do reveal that who they're working for, and that is Mistress Orlana Sissadri, and that they Sissadri, and that they have been working for her for about a month. And that she has like a disdain for Armand Tresci and does not trust him. And the party's like, okay, awesome. Well, are we official deputies now? And after a bit of back and forth, they do kind of concede, and they're like, fine, we'll get you some patches sent over to Estros's place. And but before they finally part, F.C.G does ask one more thing. He asks them about if they are familiar with any one-eyed creatures in the Orderian wilds. And Ollie thinks about it and says, there's many creatures there, but as far as one-eyed, there are some cyclops in the neighboring regions that sometimes will wander down. But other than that, she couldn't really think of anything. But she warns them that if they're going there, to stay on the trails because it's a very dangerous place. So then they part ways, and the party is... when F.C.G. was asking about that, he kind of was going through kind of some of his glitches that he's exhibited in the past. He was saying like, is there any one-eyed creatures? So the party is like, hey, are you okay? And F.C.G. says, they don't feel very great. And there's basically just this moment where everyone, especially Orem, is just encouraging F.C.G. to take care of themselves. You're always doing such a good job taking care of everybody else. You need to make sure to take care of yourself sometimes too. So they're like, let's go rest. Let's go get a drink. And they decide to go unwind at the Soot and Swill, not the Sit and Spin, where they catch up with Pretty, who was the ogre that went on a date with the three ladies. And of course, he's excited to see them. He actually makes Imogen, Laudna, and Fern a special version of the meal that they're all served. And after they all eat and kind of have a few drinks, they decide to get their lodgings for the night. And Chetney gets a room for himself because he says, he might have some company later tonight. And but while they're still at dinner, before they head up, Fern does get out the sending stone to check on Dorian. And just says, hey, just, seeing if you made it, making sure you're okay. And Matt, as Dorian, responds like, hey, it's been like 12 hours. It's the same day. Yeah, he's like, we're still on the ship. It's going to be about another week, but, we're doing good. So then as they're going up to their rooms, Chetney looks at Fern and is like, how long are we going to play this game? Like, how long are we going to pretend this isn't going to happen? And basically invites her to stay with him that night. And she says, you know what? If you howl at exactly 3 a.m., then I'll be there. So everyone goes to their rooms, and we kind of have a few. I think they have like 3 rooms. Like Chetney has his own, and then the rest of the party is split amongst 2. Yeah. But it's a bit confusing because like different party members go to different people's rooms.
Constantly going back and forth.
Yeah, to have conversations. So without getting into the nuts and bolts of that, basically the conversations that happen are... in Ashton and F.C.G., Imogen and Orem come speak to Ashton and F.C.G. and basically continue on the conversation that they were having earlier, basically encouraging F.C.G. that he needs to take care of himself. And it's basically kind of like an intervention. And, they just basically, let him know he's loved. And they really think they probably shouldn't press any further than that, just because F.C.G. really needs to get some rest. So
I think he starts to either malfunction or something, but I think Imogen's to Orem is like he's not ready.
I'm pretty sure she telepathically says that right to him.
Right.
So they just decide to leave it for there and let him get some rest. Ashton then goes and speaks to Laudna, and Laudna just had a really rough session. Like Marisha had a really rough session, which translates to Laudna. She was just rolling really poorly, and so Ashton goes and checks on Laudna, and he's like, I just feel like you had a rough day, so I wanted to make sure you were okay. And he was like, I found that there's always a lesson to be learned from hard days, and sometimes that lesson is that there's no lesson. And she's like, I appreciate you coming here and helping me out. And he's like, is there anything I can do for you in return? And Ashton says, yeah, but I don't know what that is yet. And so they just kind of have a nice bonding moment. And he does reveal that, he's kind of terrified to leave Drusar. He's always felt kind of stuck here. And they just kind of connect. Laudna's like, I've never understood people that feel stuck in that way. I've always been able to just leave. She's like, people put all this value on this encroaching doom that it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah. And Ashton's like, I appreciate the kind words, and I'm really thankful to have you and everyone else with me to leave Drusar, since they're about to go to the Heartmaw or whatever. And, just a nice little bonding moment.
Well, speaking of people being losing track of who's in rooms, I think Fern's actually in that room, and afterwards, that was a great conversation, guys. Because the 2 of them talk for 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's watching from the corner.
Yeah.
So then the final little conversation a few of them have before sleep is they're just talking about dreams. Because, FCG reveals that he doesn't dream. And Ashton says that when he's sleeping, his head will sometimes like spark. And everyone's just like, oh, that's cool. And Fern's like, I'm going to try to see if I can see that happening. And she's asked, well, hey, wait a second. What is this with you and Chetney? Like, what's going on there? And she's just said, I just thought it would be funny. And she actually goes and knocks on his door, and he jolts awake and is like, what, is it time? And she's like, no, I was just, making sure you're still alive. And so Chetney actually just goes downstairs after that, like in his underwear, and talks to the bartender and is like, can I get a wake up call and for 3 a.m.? And the bartender's basically like, no. And Chetney's like, well, what if I paid you a platinum? And he's like, oh, yeah. And he's like, well, I'm not going to. I just was wondering if you would. So he goes back upstairs with no wake-up call scheduled. So then everyone finally goes to sleep. But Imogen decides, you know what? I'm going to kind of take another look at that stone that she stole from the Shade Mother's machine. And she actually rolls an Arcana check and gets a nat 20. And she says Matt says that there's something about it that like doesn't want to let her go. It wants to be near her. It wants to take her and turn her into something better. And actually, I misspoke. That was before everyone was asleep. She does that, but then she kind of like puts it away. And I think Laudna actually like puts a pillow over it or something. Then everyone goes to sleep. But Imogen can't help herself and wants to go inspect it again. So when everyone's asleep, she kind of goes and gets it. And Laura says she kind of just lets herself go to the stone, and she kind of feels herself being pulled toward it, and it has an odd familiarity to it, which, like Blake mentioned, it's because of the things they saw in the Nightmare King's lab. And she begins to lose herself to the warmth of the gym and falls asleep.
Cradling it.
Yeah, and that's where the episode ends, but we do get one more little piece. We have a quick scene where Matt's like, so Travis, what happens at 3 a.m.? And Travis says, Chetney just definitely fell asleep, like he wasn't awake at 3 a.m. And Ashley says, well, Fern was outside his door at 2:59, and, a couple minutes passed, and she just gave up and went to sleep. And that's where the session ended.
Good stuff. Don't forget, you can check out our deep dive. We're about to do it. It's in the description below if you're watching just the recap. Having said that, that is what happened on episode 16 of Critical Role. Great episode. Will, what'd you think, my man?
Yeah, it was hilarious. We had, really interesting combat in the first half, and then some great RP in the second half. I was dying laughing, like at the... how hard are you? Or
oh my gosh, yes.
That was so funny.
Yeah. And for those who maybe missed, I don't know how you would have missed it, but when Chetney's talking about basically hooking up with Fern, Matt sort of mutters, how hurt are you? And what it sounds like is, how hard are you? It's just, that whole scene was just great.
Yeah, so I love this episode because we got a little bit of everything, and we like we kind of talked about in the past couple of weeks, we're kind of getting some answers to some of these questions we've been wondering for a while now, which I'm sure we'll talk about that in depth in a little bit. But I love the episode. What about you?
Loved it. Yeah, I mean, I said this last episode. I'll say it again here. I needed some things to be tied up before the party went to the Heartmoor. And I mentioned this last episode. It felt like we were heading towards a climax, and then the Heartmoor would have been kind of an odd break from the story. I feel very satisfied. I'm very happy. I think Matt must have watched our video and been like, oh man, I gotta wrap this up.
Made some changes.
Yeah. Ollie shows up, and hey, loved it. I will say, I just really appreciate, I think this is a skill in D&D, which is knowing how to, one, how to be creative during combat, and two, knowing how to engage with the setting that the DM has created.
Yeah. Because
it's very tempting to be very one-track minded in the sense of, okay, what can I do? I'm a paladin. I attack, divine smite. Okay, that's my turn. I'm a warlock.
Right.
Eldritch blast. It's very easy just to fall into like this rote memorization of what do I do on my turn. And it's just always enjoyable to see this group just being so engaged with realizing there's a multitude of options. Orem, I mean, Liam is always, I think, pretty amazing. I know fighters are pretty stereotypically known as being a bit boring, a bit milquetoast for,
Did you just say milk toast?
yeah,
That's a great
milquetoast.
word. That's nice.
Yeah,
Those bonus
yeah.
points for that.
Did I pronounce? Now I'm Australian thinking. Did I pronounce it right?
No, you did. I just was making
Oh,
sure. Is
okay.
that the word you use? Because you don't hear
Yeah.
that too often. So,
Yeah.
word of the day right there.
I'm sure there's like a Charlie Day version of that. Milk steak. It's very milk steak. But yeah, so they're just known as being pretty bland in terms of options. And I think Orem, it's part of what inspired, you and I are playing a D&D game where I'm a fighter. Haven't really had any combat yet, but it's been an inspiration to me to be just as creative as possible. So that's my long way of saying that, yeah, I really loved the episode. The combat, which took up the majority, I'd say about 2/3 of the episode, was really engaging, really exciting. The drill with the rope was great.
That was so awesome.
Chetney, Ashton, I mean, everyone was just on their game, just being so active and engaged. And I think combat, which can be boring, ends up consistently being really exciting for the Critical Role crew. And then naturally, all the after combat shenanigans was really great to watch. So, and it seems like we'll talk about this in our episode. It seems like we got some good resolution for now, at least to satisfy leaving for a bit. But yeah, loved it. Thought it was great.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up about the Critical Role crew being so present and like creative in combat, because you're right, and especially Liam, like that rope move was just the MVP moment of the whole episode, honestly, for me. And yeah, it's something that I haven't thought about in a long time, but you're totally right. Like they are, like, D&D combat could be super stale and boring if everyone just, all right, I make my 2 attacks. So credit to them, and also credit to Matt for like going with the flow. I mean, I can I'm not going to name any names, but I can definitely think of like some DMs or people I know that I've played D&D with that would be like, the rope thing, that doesn't work. Like, you can't do that. You know what I'm saying? So they just have like a nice chemistry where,
it's chemistry is the right way to put it, because you have the DM not being obnoxious with, no, you can't do that. That's not going to work. That's not what I envisioned. And then you also don't have the player being like, yeah, I want to like wrap it around its neck and like grind it in and then like stand on top of it and like stomp it into the drill bit, and it's dead now. I beat it. It's over. And then I want to Kamehameha blast all the shade creepers, and then like there's a nice balance there that I think is really great. I think a sign of a great DM is like seeing the inspiration and excitement of your players and like wanting to harness that within the constraints of the rule set, I guess. Yeah. And then another thing I was thinking too, they have just really good table etiquette. I think you and I have both been at tables before where someone takes their turn and then they're like, all right, cool, well, I'm done for the next 10 minutes. And then they like get on their phone or like they're doodling or they're doing something random. But I like how every player seems to be engaged in what everyone else is doing. And Sam does a great job of this too, because a lot of his actions as a cleric is reactionary and like taking damage from other people. So he's fully involved and engaged rather than, I do saw blade. All right, that's my turn. So.
Yeah. And I guess kind of the combat and the Shade Mother would be a good place to just kind of start. Which we already mentioned the rope thing. And I mean, as far as like the cool flavor things in combat, I think we pretty much covered the most of it. So unless you had anything else specific to say about that.
About the rope or about combat?
Just about the combat, or like
no, I mean,
stuff
just a couple things.
Genre.
Yeah, I mean, they had some really good ideas that panned out really well in their favor, like Fern casting daylight was really great.
Oh, yeah. I'm glad you said that. That was huge.
Yeah, coincidentally, really great. It's just one of those things that I think as the DM, like you create this really crazy encounter, and then a player does something at the very start that sort of like mitigates the entirety. You're just like, all right, Or I did a session with they were playing, this is recently, they were playing against this kind of like final-esque boss who like summons these hordes of creatures, and the creatures just
Yeah.
all kept rolling like sub 10 like every
Mm.
turn. And there's conversations to be had there on like how much do you railroad or like fudge a number or whatever, but I don't think Matt was disappointed that Daylight was cast, but I do think there was probably like an, all right, well, this the mechanics that I just put together are totally mitigated now. So, but yeah,
Yeah. I mean, thank God she did though, because I mean, it was still really close, even with that
sure.
being in play. So, and the best part about it is that I mean, it was intentional, but like she definitely didn't know that it was going to be that effective. So that's just kind of a happy accident, as Bob
Right.
Ross would say.
Our friend Bob would say.
But the Shade Mother. So, all right, there's a lot of things happening here. One, she has Broomstone, so that's an answer. I feel like there's probably more. I mean, she's 60 feet long, so maybe all the Broomstone has gone to her. But do you think that there's still
I
another
don't think
use for the smuggled
I
Broomstone?
I think so. I think the Broomstone, it seems to be a pretty low quantity. And it, to me, it screams like crazy scientist who's a bit bored and thinks like, ooh, I wonder if I could, i.e. the Nightmare King being like,
Right.
yeah, let's go ahead and just slap these bad boys. You can fit so much Broomstone in this bad boy.
Yeah.
But the reason I think it's like a side project is like, what would be the end game of this? Like, okay,
Of Yes, go ahead.
well, of implanting these devices, like, yes, it makes like a more treacherous creature, but I mean, like, is her goal to escape the mines? Is it, I mean, like, where does this go long term? I have a hard time figuring out like this being like the central part of like the big bad plan. I think it's more of Broomstone is needed for something. And on the side, the Nightmare King, which we know with Gurge, that he was actually a side project as well, like out of convenience, like, oh, let's actually do some stuff here. I see it as, hey, I have some leftover Broomstone. What should I do with it? Boop, pop it into the Shade Mother, I guess.
So that brings me to my next question. You think, okay, I'm trying to figure out the most coherent order to say this in. So clearly, I think we both agree that the Shade Mother was evolved, transformed by the Nightmare King. I mean, Lady Emoth even said as much when her thoughts
the
were
the
detected.
pronoun usage was throwing me off because I didn't know if Matt was saying she has evolved, referring to the Shade Mother, or Lady Emoth. Like Lady Emoth has now like transcended whatever form she was previously. I struggle to know which one he meant by that.
That's true. So that is there is a possibility that Lady Emoth was being referred to there, but and I don't remember exactly without like rewatching it, but for whatever reason, I thought there was context there that meant the Shade Mother, because I don't. There was some phrase like she's been down there a long time, but she's only recently evolved or something.
Yeah, there
That I
was
might be.
something. I walked away with the same implication though of like I was thinking of the movie Slither, where like the bad guy who's infected or whatever takes the woman and puts her like in the barn shed, and she becomes like the mother of like all the little slugs. Did you see this movie?
Mm-mm.
Oh, okay. It's like a I'd say like a dark comedy
I
because
think did
it's,
James Gunn do that?
I don't know, actually. It's a good
I
question.
don't know why. Like I've never seen it, but I don't know why that popped into my head.
Yeah, it's got a really great cast. It has a bit of a cult following now. I mean, it's got a great it's been received pretty well after the fact, but all that to say, there's a woman that gets taken and basically kidnapped and becomes like the mother of all these body snatching
Mm,
slugs. This is
okay.
at the start of the movie. And so that's kind of the implication I got, or the reference that I got, was that some woman, whoever this Shade Mother is, was taken, maybe even lived in the mines or something, and was like a feral-esque woman.
Mm.
And the Nightmare King, like you said, evolved her into the Shade Mother, who now, mutates these shade creepers and takes people and puts them in pods. I don't know. But all that to say, yeah, I wasn't really clear on who was being referred to, but I walked away with the same implication that this was something prior.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so that's what I was thinking. My thoughts were that that's an interesting point that I hadn't thought about with the woman, because I mean the shade mother was described as having, I don't know what to call this, but like the woman
Feminine
avatar
features.
part of it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, like humanoid-esque.
yeah, so I didn't think about the fact that there might have been like an actual person there at some point. My thoughts were that the slug creature was down in these caves for forever, and it's one of the things the Nightmare King experimented on, and it became the Shade Mother. Maybe he combined a woman with a creature or something. Anyway, the thing I was trying to get to from earlier was that clearly the Nightmare King evolved the Shade Mother, whatever the exact details of that story are. But we know that Duggar was the one stealing Broomstone, presumably.
Right.
And Duggar is clearly a creation of the Shade Mother. So I would say that Duggar works for the Shade Mother, and then the Shade Mother may work for the Nightmare King, but I don't think Duggar was working for the Nightmare King. Do you? Or what's your...
I mean, I think, we heard the Nightmare King say, like, I have like a spider web of all these little things happening. I think it was a project that he had cooking in the pot over here, and the Shade Mother, like, left her own machinations, was pod snatching people, because we also know in that previous cavern, didn't they say there was like hundreds
There's lots of cocoons, right?
Like empty cocoons where people had crawled out of. And so this seems to imply there's quite a few more people, not just Lady Emoth, not just Duggar, who are in... we don't know the population of Dressar, but seems like quite a few people are pod people.
Yeah, I wonder if... And I know we saw shade creepers like literally come off the body of Duggar, and I guess Emoth too, but I wonder if they maybe could come out of cocoons too, or... Because, I mean, that would be crazy if there were really that many, like, Duggars running around. But anyway, so what I was getting at is that if Duggar is working for the Shade Mother, I wonder if the Broomstone theft was just the Shade Mother's hustle, and the Nightmare King had nothing to do with it. But
maybe,
but so
who
I don't know.
Well, I guess, yeah. I mean, maybe those workshops weren't there at like the workstations. Who was working at the workstations? Because didn't they say there were like some people tinkering there or something like that?
In the Nightmare King's lab, or
no,
below?
Like in the Shade Mothers. Like, I'm thinking about the previous session. There was something about there being...
Oh yeah, there were like other humanoid figures, right? They were talking about.
Let's see.
Like husks. But while you're looking that up, so what I was wondering is that if the Nightmare King had nothing to do with the Broomstone, then maybe it was just for her levitation purposes. Like maybe she just wanted to fly and was like, go find me Broomstone. Mm-hmm. But if the Nightmare King was the one involved with the Broomstone, then I think there is a larger plot still at hand with it. But if it was the Shade Mother, I feel like that's probably the only thing it was for. But what's interesting is that drill. Like, what are they drilling for? And that could be another, like, maybe they're drilling to put some Broomstone down in the middle of the earth and lift up the fingers like we've talked about.
Yeah, I mean, it is an old mine, so it could just be leftover mining equipment. But yeah, I mean, it seems serviceable. So it seems like it's been abandoned. The mine's been abandoned for months. And so the fact that things are still serviceable, and it does seem like she has humanoid-esque creatures helping her. Going back to the previous episode when Chetney first entered her cavern, there are two small workstations. Two figures are hunched over the tables, manipulating things around it. So not just shade creepers down here. We didn't really see that happen in the combat, I don't think.
They like easily dispatched at least one that I can remember. So they might have just been blown away in a fireball or something.
Or something. Yeah, you may be right. So yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I guess to kind of distill all this jarble is, I wonder. Clearly, the Nightmare King is just doing a bunch of stuff. You know, he has his own plans. We're still not really aware of that. So what I'm wondering, I guess, is the Shade Mother just a firecracker he let loose, or is he pulling the strings of what she's doing? I guess that's what I'm failing to try to say finally. And I really don't know. I feel like she's the type of creature you couldn't really control. So to me, it kind of feels like a just something he set off and left to cause chaos or whatever. But maybe he's still orchestrating. I don't know.
Yeah, and then I mean, surely there's going to be like a Shade Mother part 2, right? I mean, do you think the party just we're good? I mean, surely they're going to like Ghostbuster this thing, right? Like, I think Ollie even said as much that like they would clean house or something.
Yeah,
or
so I think so. I mean, I think the Green Seekers are going to tell. I mean, they're obviously going to tell Orlana Sadri, and you know, I think something will be done about that. I don't know if the party will be the ones to like go back down there, type of thing. But surely they're not just.
Does that happen? And it seems like a loose thread. I mean, has it happened in previous campaigns where like they don't kill an evil creature and they just never really go back to it?
Not in this exact same way, but there's definitely been like retreats from battle, you know, and you know, I would say that like if it's important, like then it will be dealt with in some way, but the party might not necessarily interact with the Shade Mother again. But maybe they will. I mean, it might be unsatisfying for Matt to say, yeah, the wardens went down there and took care of it, and that's done. So, you know, we'll see how the story converges. But
I guess, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying we'll probably get something about it, even if it's just like a one sentence, like, this is what happened that the party finds out from like somebody in town. Like there will be some, you know, closure to it in some way, and that might end up being, hey, we got to go back down there because this is getting out of hand, and or you know, I mean, really, it could be anything, but you won't be just left hanging with what we have right now.
I guess the reason I assume there will be a part 2 is because it just feels like a kind of a big deal. Like there's this crazy cocoon slug lady who's body snatching people.
Yeah.
Presumably hundreds. This has pretty large. I mean, this isn't like, you know, call animal control because we have a feral cat in our garbage can.
Right.
Like this is like pretty, you know, aberration, evil type of creature. Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it's like, yeah, the wardens, they were looking to score one for the team and get back on top of people's perceptions. So they went down there and they got it. But yeah, I don't know. I'd be interested to see kind of what happens from here with it.
Yeah, and I mean, we might, you know, maybe it comes back when the night, like, because clearly there's still a larger story here with the Nightmare King and whatever else. So maybe it all comes back into play once that thread gets followed a bit more.
But didn't you get? Here's what's interesting to me is the implication I got with the Nightmare King was a lot more like mercenary-esque, because when they defeat him, quote, he says something to the effect of like, well, I've already been paid half, so I'll see you all later. Not like a maniac who's evil. And like some of these things feel more deliberately evil in the sense of like, we can, I guess, assume that Armand Treshy is behind the Shade Mother in some way, right? We know that he had the mines closed. We know he was with Lady Emoth. It just seems like there's, I guess for me, I wonder what will we see happen with the Nightmare King. Again, because his motivations do seem a lot less I'm not saying he's not evil, a lot less blatantly evil, whereas like the Shade Mother, Treshy, whatever, these feel like more explicitly watch the world burn type of deals.
Well, I don't know. I think he is maybe on that same category because to me, in that fight, I don't think he was defeated. I think he showed mercy, and that was,
yeah, absolutely, yeah. I say defeated in terms of like the combat was over.
Right.
And
but I mean, while I do think that like, yeah, okay, he can't be that bad because he was just like, I got my money, I'm out. But I think that was all hinging on that Fern interaction, and I think there's just more we don't know there yet. So I think
Sure.
that for whatever reason he took mercy on them in that moment because of who she is or potential connections there. But I still think he's probably like, not that he's like mustache twirling like pure evil like, Joker, watch the world burn, but I do think he's like solidly in that same category as Armand
Yeah, and
and
I'm not.
potentially worse than Armand.
Maybe I misspoke in the sense of like I'm not suddenly like hey, he's misunderstood. Like he's he's the good guy. I just mean like in terms of like getting to the bottom of like the end game for like let's just loop all the bad guys into a box
Yeah.
of like what's the plan, like what's the end goal. I have a hard time seeing the Nightmare King as the boss of all of them,
Hmm.
since his motivation seemed like, yeah, I did my job, I did whatever. I'd put more like Armand Tresci at the top of that, like pulling all the strings, like explicitly the evil boss. Although I'd have to see more of him because these things seem like way more evil than he could handle almost for what little we know about him. Like I envision the Shade Mother just like eating him, and so
That's true.
I'm, it makes me wonder, is the Nightmare King the person at the top, or is there still like an unyet discovered person, figure, creature who's even controlling Armand, who would have the pull of the mimic. I mean, does Armand have like a box of creatures that he just, what I'm saying? Like it doesn't fully add up to me. And so I kind of wonder like who's at the top? Is
Yeah,
it the Nightmare King or something else?
that's fair. I think that now this is kind of confusing, but I think like within the current web that we're trying to unravel here, Armand is the one that set these things in motion because we know like he's trying to get the Paragon's call in, he's trying to make a name for himself. So like he's the one at the top of that scheme. And part of his plan involves the Nightmare King, who's created the Shade Mother, who's created these werewolves, who potentially created the Mimic. But I don't think that like I think the Nightmare King has his own plan,
Sure.
and like this is just a mutually beneficial relationship for the time being. So I think that even though Armand is at the top of the current web we're dissecting, I think there's a larger web that the Nightmare King's a part of, and that's so like he's technically on top, even though he's working for Armand. We just don't have that full picture yet.
Yeah, it's
Um,
like Dark Knight Rises. Like, I've paid you a small fortune. It's like, and this gives you power over me.
yeah, exactly.
So,
So I think, but there very well may be someone pulling Armand strings. But I just think for whatever reason, the Nightmare King is kind of like adjacent to all that. They're using each other, and I'm very interested to see what the Nightmare King's trying to get out of all of this. Because here's the part that I'm kind of confused about. Because clearly, like we talked about, the Nightmare King probably made the Shade Mother. She seems like like an entity that has her own ambitions and plans that don't really feel like they're being controlled by Armand or the Nightmare King necessarily. So like, but we know Armand is the one that's got those minds paid off to be kept clear. So like, did the Nightmare King just create the Shade Mother and was like, my work is done here, and then Armand was like, yo, Shade Mother, like do this for me. So I don't know how to connect all these pieces because
yeah, it seems like there is like an element of like just sowing chaos where like you unleash something, kind of let it run its course. But then again, the other side of it is like Lady Emoth and the Shade Creepers, them robbing the headmaster. Like
yeah,
there's some like intentionality
yeah,
here
there's
that
some intelligent.
yeah, and I don't really see the Shade Mother being like, okay, here's what I need you to do.
Right.
And so and the
That's a good
fact
point.
that Emoth showed up as Armand's +1, um it does seem like Armand's still pulling the strings, but again, like the conversation there is a bit weird to me of, I don't see him like meeting up with the Shade Mother. It's
Right.
definitely, but then again, like how does that all parse together with the Shade Mother's ambitions? And I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. So like Emoth was seemingly working outside of her work for the Shade Mother, unless the Shade Mother is somehow involved in the political machinations of the city, which I doesn't seem that's
Yeah,
the
it
type
seems
of
like it'd be a
entity.
little bit of disinterest for her. So
Yeah,
for
so
sure.
that's a really great point, which kind of pulls me back to my earlier thing when I was talking about Duggar and the broomstone. That maybe Duggar was stealing the broomstone for not like obviously the Shade Mother has broomstone implanted in her, but maybe the real broomstone plot was related to Armand or related to the Nightmare King, even. So
Maybe it's the friends we made along the way.
I think it was. One final thing, or not to cut you off if you have more, but
No, yeah.
one final thing I wanted to ask is, we were talking about that drill, and you made the great point that this is a mine, like maybe that was just leftover drill. I thought that thing Imogen took was in the drill. Was it not? Was it in something else?
Yeah, I kind of was having trouble because there was I think there was like a lab station that it was on, or there were like devices. I think you mentioned there was like a central device.
Yeah.
Um
Which I thought that was referring to the drill, but maybe there
yeah,
was.
so this is where I got trouble parsing it together because I mean if it's a drill, it's pretty obviously a drill, right? But Matt described like this device that, and even like out of character, clarify that it's like, yeah, it's like what you saw in the lab that the Nightmare King was tinkering with. So I couldn't tell if this purple gem was like set in that device or if it was one and the same with the drill that they activated after the fact. I think it's the former, that there was also a drill, and there was this odd device. They didn't know what it was doing or what it was for, and there was this purple stone set into it, almost like an activating stone that she took out of it. And maybe it was also a drill. I don't know, but
I
not
need
sure.
to. I need to watch the section again because I remember F.C.G messed with the device,
Right.
and so is that when the drill turned on? Because if so, that would make me
No.
think that they're one and the same. But because it
Let
did
me look.
something happened, right? Because if it wasn't the drill, then nothing happened. Because I don't remember any other device doing anything. Um, but
Yeah, I'll take a look real quick.
so yeah, while you're looking that up, and it might be hard to concentrate on two things at once, but I'm working under the assumption that it was the drill. So if it's not the drill, just disregard everything I'm saying. But if it is the drill, then that opens up a bunch of possibilities in my mind. Like I mentioned earlier, like maybe drilling to put that broomstone down there, or drilling for something. And we obviously know that gem is probably bad news. It's like reaching out and wanting to evolve people. So like, why would it be attached to a drill? Like what's the end game there? Any luck?
Yeah, I think it's one of the same. It looks like it's the one of the same. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, maybe not. I I think it's one of the same. There's an unfinished machine that rests in the room. There's a hoard of coins and gems that rest among the machine with a single purple gem in its center. Um, and then later, it says that as they're looking for Chetney, uh, the Shade Mother slithers down and wraps herself around the purple glowing crystal, which is really interesting. I don't know, man.
Are you looking at
I'm
the
looking at crit roll stats.
okay. Because okay, I
They keep calling it the machine, so I think it has to be one and the same.
yeah, because I'm seeing this part that talks about FCG going over to the machine, and that's when the drill activates. So I mean, it's I mean, we can just get lost in the language here. So I think it's fair to say it's entirely possible that there's two things here, and the machine got used for both, so it got confusing. But operating under the assumption that the gem was part of the drill, I don't know. That's very interesting to me because like it seems like this gem was used to evolve the Shade Mother, and just from the language Matt used when Imogen was looking at it, like it wants you, it wants to take you, it wants to change you. What is that doing attached to a drill? Like what's like I just don't. I'm trying to think of what this could mean, and I just have no ideas.
And like, haven't you ever heard of Duracell? Like, what are we doing here? It's like,
Well, that is interesting. Maybe it's just powering the drill in lieu of. Well, I was gonna say like they don't. This world doesn't have electricity, but
yeah, I mean,
maybe
he
that's
says
merely a power source and not.
that's kind of the implication I'm getting in hindsight now is that it's some kind of like battery that allows the drill to operate, which is probably a lot more effective. Think they said it was drilling into the central pillar. It's probably a lot more effective than, you know, having shapekeepers like tink away at
Yeah.
at rock and stone. So
Yeah. So
who
what?
knows?
What do you think they're drilling for?
Maybe they're trying to bring the whole thing down. I don't know.
I mean, that's my best guess. Is brimstone involved or not? That there's some massive like what's the word like I don't know the word, but shift in the like geography of Drusar that is being planned, and maybe that's because there was some language about like the Shade Mother wanting to be free, right? Or not those weren't the
Right.
exact words, but like she's like
Yeah.
so maybe it's like an explosion or lifting them up or something that will allow everything down here in the dark to come to the surface.
Yeah, but she doesn't want to be in daylight. So
That's
I don't
true.
know. I don't know. Or maybe it's just like, when you like emerge from your room after a long night and you're just like, ah, it's so maybe that's more what was happening.
That's a good point. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll find out. But
Then we may never know.
that to me that maybe is like a ends justify the means. So like we'll work together as far as the Shade Mother and Armand and the Nightmare King or whoever. But this whole drill scene themes like more of Armand's wishes more than the Shade Mother's maybe.
Yeah. Well, isn't the implication of the stone that it's from the Nightmare King?
Right, yeah.
Because when she does her Arcana check, it says it's like Fey something,
Yeah.
Fey infused.
So his wishes maybe. Yeah.
Which is she gonna turn into like a Shade Mother or something, or
I,
what happened to
I don't
Imogen?
know. I mean, maybe I mean money on the table. Do I think Laura's character is going to like fundamentally shift? Probably not, but I don't know. I don't think that necessarily is like you put anything in a Shade Mother pops out, but I think it is just like the arcane element for some sort of transmutive magic. So
Right.
something might happen to her.
She grows gills.
But yeah, I mean, so we're just wildly speculating probably for like the last 30 minutes, but just all interesting stuff. And I mean, like you said, or like you mentioned, I think hopefully we'll get some resolution to these things, but I just don't know if it'll necessarily come in the form of like the party venturing back down there to finish her off. But we'll see.
Do you think the party next session starts heading to the Heartmore?
I mean, it seems like that's where we're headed. I would imagine. I mean, unless whatever happens with Imogen is like, we got to go find the Nightmare King right now and figure out how to reverse this, or figure out what's going on here.
Maybe the Heartmore will be like their version of the Witcher video, where they'll just keep talking about it, and then we're up to episode 50. Are we going to do this or not?
You might be. I hope not though, because I'm excited for like a heist scenario competition, if that's still kind of what
the
we're
heist,
getting.
and then getting some breadcrumbs on F.C.G's story, as well as what's it called, the Loomis twins,
Right.
and then maybe even some of Ashton's background. Though I don't know if Ashton how interested he is to revisit it, because I think F.C.G said something like, "Yeah, maybe we'll run into your old crew," and Ashton said, because they've mentioned it a few times, like the old nobodies. And Ashton finally said this episode, like, "Hey, don't think about them more than I do." And so, which is very in character of Ashton, but I also wondered if it was his way of saying, like, yeah, I mean, that's not really like it's like a priority in my mind for my character.
Yeah.
So
It'll be I mean, it'll be interesting if and when we do run into them. Because it feels like he's definitely got some like baggage there since they all abandoned him basically. Even though he's like, I'm cool with it. That's
Yeah.
what I would have done. I think, you know.
Yeah, single tier.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's great.
So yeah, there, a lot really could. We could kind of go a lot of directions once we head that direction for the Heartmore.
Yeah.
But a few other things I wanted to quickly touch on was one, the whole Travis and or Chetney and Fern thing is just hilarious. And I think Sam put it like perfectly with like, this is a dangerous game of chicken y'all are playing for like who's gonna back away first if they keep like, you know, making these jokes. So I'm really excited to see that pan out, and just the fact that it's Travis is kind of perfect as well because not to give any spoilers, but Travis has kind of, at least historically, been not the type of player to like RP the romance aspect of things. So it's just funny to, and not that he's like truly like trying to romance Fern. Like I think clearly it was more of a humor thing here, but it's still just funny to see this kind of aspect from him, and interested to see how it evolves. It would be hilarious if it actually did turn into like an actual romance. But you know, we'll see. And
I think if it did, Fern would try to convince him to bite her.
yeah, probably. That would be hilarious. I didn't even think about that. But also, and I was talking to this about somebody. Now, forgive me because it might have. All right, I don't remember, so I'm not going to just speculate. But somebody and I were talking about how it's just great to have Travis kind of back in a chaotic kind of role. Campaign 1 Grog was very chaos, and I'm sure if, for those of you that saw Campaign 1 or watched Legend of Vox Machina can kind of know that. Campaign 2, he was less so. He was more of a, I mean, I don't want to give spoilers or anything, but he just wasn't very chaotic, wasn't the comic relief of the party. So it's great to see him now as Chetney kind of filling that role a little bit more because he's so good at it. So
yeah, he's great.
It's just been great to see.
Yeah, he's a fun character for sure. And I like all the characters. I've said that a million times, but I think anytime someone takes the stage, they have done a good job with it.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
What else from this episode? I'm just looking at that's while I have it up.
It wasn't really from this episode. It kind of was, but I'm going to kind of use this tangentially. F.C.G, you know, kind of glitching again, talking about the creature.
A lot. It feels like surely we're going to get some kind of answer soonish. I don't know.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to rehash just all of our thoughts we've had on that before. When it comes to the forefront in the story, I'm sure we will. But just for here, I wanted to bring up, did you see or happen to see what Ness posted about his theory about F.C.G? I think he posted it on the Discord, but he made a Reddit post kind of like compiling different instances of when birds were mentioned. And apparently, like every time birds are mentioned, Sam has like a reaction. I'm paraphrasing here. So I think it would be interesting if the creature that attacked him was a bird, or if there's some, even if it's not the creature, maybe there's some history with him and birds. So yeah, definitely check that out if you didn't, because
I'm looking at it now. This is great.
So Ness, great work by the way, man.
Detective Ness.
I'm really interested to see how that pans out.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I need to go back, and I'd encourage you to do the same thing. Whenever he has his like bugging out session, something's muttered that's not really received. And I think Matt says something like, hey, make sure you roll or make sure you do something. But I watched it and I didn't notice Sam Riegel being like, okay, yeah, like the conversation just kept going. And so I don't know if I misheard Matt saying something, but I think he said something that as it was happening. And so I need to go back and watch it again and see, because we've talked about this before, where like Matt having him like be like, hey, you take 2 points or you take this.
Yeah. Do you remember what part of the episode that was kind of around? Like, was it when he was glitching?
It was when he was glitching. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah, I need to look at it again.
Because yeah, part of me was wondering how much was just Sam RPing and adding flavor versus, but because of the traumatic experience with the bird, and so that was just him role playing well, versus like an actual mechanical thing that was happening to him via
Right.
some system he and Matt made up. Because do you recall him like rolling any natural ones last session?
No.
I don't either. Not that he might have, but I don't either. So, um, yeah, super interested to find out more about that. And we're kind of getting little teases with the party interventioning him and stuff. So,
Right.
but I mean, it does seem like he doesn't know. Like, it doesn't seem like he's not sharing. Because like Imogen detected thoughts, and
Yeah.
there was
It's
like a
like
wall
repressed,
there.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'll. All that to say, I don't think it's him just not trusting the party enough to share. But so it's not a matter of him just telling us next session or anything. But it does seem like we're making progress. So maybe we'll get some answers there soon.
We shall see. And we may, like I said, we may be heading into the Heartmoor as soon as next episode.
Yeah.
And then it'll be our last one of the month because the next week will be EXU.
Yeah. And it's the 7-year anniversary tomorrow.
Pretty crazy.
It is super crazy. They obviously it's an anniversary, so that's exciting in and of itself. But I wonder, like, kind of what they might do to celebrate. I mean,
TPK.
It should be fun. Like, I wouldn't be surprised to see them all in costume or something tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm excited. Good. And then EXU, which I mean, I'm sure we'll do an episode when EXU comes out, so we can talk about it then. But I'm kind of curious about how the filming schedule. I wonder if, and I'm sure I'm rambling, because since they film these so far in advance, I wonder if there's any chance that maybe these EXU episodes were filmed before Dorian actually left. Probably not, but I was just wondering that because I was like, they had to, they have to get Amy back and Abria back. I'm sure the scheduling was probably not really easy to do. For sure. So,
and it's presumably picking up from where we've left off in the campaign 3. Because his brother's going to be present. So we'll see how Opal is faring with that crown on her head.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if she's still wearing it.
Great question.
I think she's been wearing it the whole time. And I also, we know a new person is joining.
Right.
I forget their name at the moment, so forgive me for that. But I guess Abria is probably going to play Cyrus, but it would be interesting if Matt, who's playing Dariax, was also playing Cyrus. But I doubt. I mean, I think it's going to be Abria, but it'll be interesting to see. Yeah. I was also wondering if they would maybe bring in a guest to play Cyrus, but I think the new person they're bringing on is female, so I'm not sure that that's the case. So,
we shall see.
I'm excited for that.
Yeah,
it's cool that we're getting back to back too, like Thursday, Friday.
Yeah. I wonder if it's going to be like an extended one shot and like, like, hey, we're going to cut today's episode, pick up tomorrow, or if it's like literally like they filmed it 2 separate gigs and just they're airing it back-to-back nights. But
I bet they filmed it all at once, probably just for the scheduling reasons. But we'll see.
Yeah, I don't want to wax too much either about like what I think it'll be like compared to the 8 or 9 episodes of EXU. But I will say I do think this abbreviated 1 or 2 episodes is going to be a lot more, a lot better received. But we'll see.
I think so too, especially because it seems like there's a specific like story and arc that is to be told here without just like putting the players on a map and letting them do whatever. So
yeah, it seems very intentional. I think it said Kaimal. Descending somewhere in Kaimal. So okay, cool. Well, anything else you want to talk about?
I don't think so. I'll look at my notes really quick. If you want to go ahead and do our outro, but I think I've covered everything.
We got to do our thumbnail too.
That's right. Oh, there are 2 things just really, really quick that I wanted to mention.
Okay.
First of all, we didn't talk about this at all, but Orlana Sasadri being who the Green Seekers were working for, there was, I don't remember what it was, but there was, while that was being revealed, either Matt said something or somebody in the cast said something, and I couldn't tell if they misspoke or if the context was elsewhere. But I was like, did we just get a reveal that she's on the quorum?
I had the same thought, exact same thought. Yeah. And I don't think we got the reveal, but I did wonder if that was the
because somebody said something, and it might have been like a different conversation happening. So I feel like we didn't because it wasn't very ceremonious. Like nobody reacted to that.
Right.
But something like that made us think that. So maybe she is.
Right.
In any case, though, that was the woman that Laudna spoke to and said she was a Whitestone or DeRollo, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that's just funny that ended up being, a good guy. I mean, we don't know that she's a good guy, but
right.
So I just thought that was interesting, and I wanted to parse your quorum thoughts there, so we're on the same page. Yeah, let us know in the comments if you guys are like, oh, she definitely is. You missed this, because I want to know. And then also, I thought was interesting is that they're the only two Green Seekers. Like I thought that they were like a whole organization, but no, it's just Gus and Ollie.
Yeah, I'm real curious about that because that threw me. I actually thought I misunderstood. Like I thought I was misunderstanding. Like they're the only two in the region. They're the only two like ever. Like
apparently they're just the only two.
Yeah.
I mean, unless I misunderstood, but yeah, that was very surprising to me. So I want to know more.
Like yeah, I was definitely confused by
like that, Highlander. So. There can only be one.
Yeah,
but
two.
But two. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I want to know so much more now. Like it kind of makes more sense about the deputy thing because there's only the two of them. It's like, no, we don't add anybody else. Like, how did they get this reputation? Like, who are they? Like, so I just thought that was fascinating. And those are the only other two things. Oh, sorry, one more. The Emmett Red Buble thing of the knockoff. Matt brought it up with like the knockoff Green Seeker patches or whatever. I just thought that was a little jab at Redbubble. If you're not familiar with that, it's like a website, kind of like Etsy, where you can just like sell whatever you want. So I'm sure they've had a bunch of like Critical Role knockoff stuffs being sold there. So I just thought that was a hilarious little
little
jab.
Well, what do you want to do? What do you want to do for our thumbnail today?
Okay, how about like you face palming and me being like, "Oops," because I messed up the first 10 minutes of our first try on this.
All right, that works. All right,
ready? Okay.
All right, well, thank you all for checking out this video today and tuning into the Pixelists podcast. Don't forget that we love all sorts of commentary and thoughts and theories. Put them down in the episode description below and let us know what you think. And next episode's coming live tomorrow. We'll be watching it, and stay tuned for our thoughts both on our YouTube channel, on the podcast, and on our Twitter at the Pixelists. We'll catch you later.
Yeah.
See ya.
Bye, you guys.